Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 5, and today we're taking a look at the newly added to the game 1958 Plymouth Fury. Now this was initially a sub-series of the Plymouth Belvedere from 1956 to 1958, but from 1959 onwards it became its own name. And this was a car that pioneered Chrysler's new front suspension, which was called which was a torsion bar suspension system called Torsion Air Ride, which helped improve ride quality and reduce road noise. So basically making it a far more livable kind of car to drive every day. And a formidable looking car, quite frankly, easily one of the best looking cars from the late 50s, not just from America but worldwide, quite frankly, because this does the kind of classic late 50s American styling perfectly, quite frankly. It's not as overly ostentatious to say as a Cadillac, but it's just perfectly proportioned in a lot of ways. There's a lot of chrome and like that, and you got usual white wall tyres and you get enclosed rear wheels and all that lot, but just generally it just looks superb. And really glad to have this back in the Forza series, quite frankly, because it's easily one of my favourite classic American cars. And even though it's not technically a muscle car, it's got a lot of muscle car qualities to it, including rear wheel drive and a rather large engine up front. And but in particular I really like the interior. It's so far ahead of anything you get in Europe at the time, with its really big speedometer. You got power steering, as you can see that is labelled on the steering wheel there. You've got your radio, you got your aircon. Pretty much the only thing that is I'm not really sure if does this have wind down windows or power windows. I'm not sure, but either way it's a very luxurious car, and one that has plenty of room. As you can see, there's a huge amount of room in the rear, and there's a massive amount of space in the boot as well. Easily space for a massive standard spare wheel, even two to be honest, and you'd still have plenty of room spare going. But the big piece of this this car is the engine, which is an optional engine. It's the optional Golden Commando engine, basically a big block V8, and it's a 5.7 litre V8 to be more specific, producing 305 horsepower and 370 pounds-feet of torque, which is far and above some muscle cars even from the 60s. So pretty hefty vehicle with a huge amount of power, because it does weigh 3,595 pounds, but it's got a lot of power to go with that weight as well. And you could even get a more powerful version of this. It was fuel injected, but they eventually recalled that for some reason, probably not very reliable, given fuel injection wasn't the most common of technologies back in America at the time. So but that produced 315 horsepower. So you really are getting onto muscle car territory with this car, even well before the muscle car was even a thing. So but nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. Now, so this is your typical American car, not the best handling or anything like that, but it's a great car in a straight line. So let's see what it can do on this drag strip before we hit the speed camera, and then we'll get it around the track. So it's pretty sharpish in a straight line, to be honest, which, considering it's only got a 3-speed automatic gearbox, which kind of saps some of the power and the torque. It's hardly slow, as you can see, for a late 50s car that weighs quite a lot. Going to do well in excess of 100 miles an hour before we hit the speed camera, and 111 miles an hour, which is pretty good for a car that isn't far off 70 years old now. So and even though it's a little tricky to keep it in a straight line when you want to get going, it's not just about the destination or the result, it's about the drive along the way, and this is a perfect encapsulation of that kind of mantra as far as I'm concerned. Because no, it's not the quickest in a straight line, no, it's not the fastest around a corner, or even the easiest of cars to go around a corner, but it's just such a joy to drive, just because it's an entertaining car. It rolls around, wallows around and all of that. But you've got a great sounding engine up front, you've got great looks, you've got a really rather nice interior to drive around in as well, if driving inside the car on this game is your thing. And it just looks utterly unique in comparison to most other cars, not just from the time, but also in terms of the game itself. So we're in D class, but near the top, which is pretty good. But as you can see from the stats, it's not particularly great. Speed is good, The handling is actually better than some cars from even the 60s in terms of American cars. You look at a AMC Javelin, for instance, and it has the same handling stat as that, but the braking is quite poor because it is such an old car that does weigh a hell of a lot. But the acceleration is decent, and the launch is pretty good as well if you can get it off the line in a correct manner, because yeah, it can be a little bit tentative even as an automatic, but if you get it off the line properly, you are rewarded with a decently quick launch. So yeah, but as per usual, we'll listen to the car for a little bit first, and then we'll talk about it some more. So yeah, as you can see, it's quite a wallowy car, but it's a great sounding engine, even though it's hardly the highest in revvings of V8s, but that again was typical for American classics from the 50s, 60s and even 70s. So yeah, it's no lower revving than other contemporary cars from America. In fact, there were even lower revving cars than this, but yeah, you can definitely feel like it's a car on a very large car, a very heavy car on very soft suspension. So yeah, you really do have to take that into account when driving it, because yeah, it is more about power and looks and engine noise than you know, sophistication. But it's by no means a slow car in a straight line. 0 to 60 is dealt with in 7 seconds, which is hardly slow. Some American cars from the 60s and 70s were doing it only about 6.5, and it would go to a top speed of 143 miles an hour and manage 0 to 100 in 15.583 seconds, which is pretty slow, no doubt about that. It's the automatic gearbox that is only 3 gears, which is really holding it back in terms of its acceleration, because it's not making the most of the power, it's not keeping it in the torque band or in the power band or anything like that. So yeah, that is a little bit of a shame in that regard. I would have preferred a 4-speed at least, if you can't get a manual, but regardless, it's still a fun car to drive. And yeah, more crucially, as a fan of films, this is the ultimate horror movie car, as this was in the 1983 film Christine, which is yeah, a really good horror film. It's easily one of my favourites from the 80s, but it's this car that is the star of that film. It's not the actors, it's not the cast, it's not the characters, it's not the even the music, the soundtrack, which is great, but it's not even that. That is the main draw of that film. It is this car, and yeah, I can't imagine any other car from this period that would fit that film, to be honest, because this is a very alluring car, especially to someone that's young and wanting to get their first vehicle. And yeah, this fits that kind of perfectly in that regard, as yeah, it's a very alluring car. It looks great, it's got a lot of power, and yeah, you can guarantee that you're going to get attention no matter where you're seen in it. I guarantee this got a lot of attention even in the 50s, never mind nowadays. So yeah, highly recommend getting this car if you can. It's currently on the festival playlist for only 20 points, which isn't a lot for such a great classic American car, and yeah, it will bump up your Plymouth collection by 1, because taking you up to 3. So yeah, do wish we had more Plymouths on this game, in any Forza game for that matter, but we do now have the Barracuda and the Cuda to go alongside this. So yeah, highly recommend getting it if you haven't already, especially if you're into your classic American cars. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.